Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Pod Save the Youth. I'm your host, David Seaton.
And I'm your co-host, Delnos Kazemi.
And today we are joined by two incredible guests to talk all about internet safety and everything in the wake of the Take It Down Act. So we're so happy to be joined by Ariel and Zaman here today. And I'm going to just ask them right now to give some brief introductions to themselves, their personal stories, and their organization's work. Take it away.
Hey everyone, great to be here and be having this conversation with you. My name is Zaman Qureshi. I'm the co-chair of Design It For Us. I graduated from American University last year, so I still consider myself a young person. And I've been doing work around kids' online safety and privacy work for the past couple of years now. We co-founded Design It For Us, myself and my co-founder MLM Key in March of 2023. And it really was about a vision to try and bring more youth voices into the policy conversation around tech. I think young people generally have a pretty cynical view as to how a lot of adults approach tech. I think just generally in the way that policy is approached, but also in the way that adults approach the actual technology doesn't always lend itself to a lot of participation from young people. And so as Emma and I were doing advocacy around the space around responsible technology and seeing how many young people cared about this as an issue, but had very few touch points with the key decision makers who would ultimately be creating the course for regulating this space, pushed us to co-found Design It For Us. And I honestly wasn't sure what it would look like in a short amount of time, and in 2 years we've grown to almost 300 members in almost 40 states in the U.S. and 17 countries around the world. And I think that that is because young people care about this as an issue, are seeing the trends going on right now around the power of big tech companies and how it's affecting their lives. Frankly, I think everyone has a story or perspective to share, and I think wants to be able to take back some control over their digital wellness and ecosystem.
Thanks, Simone, for giving all of that background. I'm Ariel Geismar. I'm the co-chair of Design It For Us. And our organization is the epicenter where young people can come together and talk about the issues that they're seeing with technology as it pertains to their lives. My background is in student social justice organizing. So when I was 16, I started organizing my peers around different policies in New York, Washington, D.C., and across the country. Um, Teaching young people and empowering young people to talk directly to decision makers that are making bills, decisions, and choices that directly impact us is one of the most meaningful things to me. Um, I started doing work particularly in technology in 2020, as I, began to care more about mental health because of things in my life. So as I, kind of look to this space, right, noting that technology, mental health, young people all kind of come together. It's hard to talk about one without the other these days. And that's when I started, right, doing advocacy on this particular issue. I joined Design It For Us in its very early stages, I think in the first few weeks in 2023, and have just kind of watched it become this amazing mainstay in youth organizing and particularly in technology. So really, really excited to talk to you all today about some of the stuff that we're seeing and the importance of young people being here and being a part of this.
Yeah, well, thank you both for joining us today again, and thank you for all the work that you're doing at your organization. You're really making a difference, and we're so happy to have you in the conversation with us this afternoon. So, I guess my first question is kind of adding on to something that Zaman said. Um, a lot of young people are very skeptical of are very skeptical when politicians right now talk about regulating technology because first of all, no one wants to have their technology taken away. It's what young people rely on to communicate, to socialize, to, relate to the world and hear about, somewhat hear different perspectives and educate themselves in current events. Um, so, how do we bring more young people, first of all, into the policymaking aspect, but also into the messaging aspect of of regulating technology, and how do we sort of start to rebrand the idea of regulations on technology? Because I think even the word regulation is kind of a dirty word for young people right now.
Yeah, David, I think you're hitting on like the existential question of what we kind of wrestle with every day. And as people who've been doing this work for a while, I will say that there's no direct, easy answer to that question. I think young people by nature have been socialized by the big tech companies. Like, let's say that upfront and be upfront about that. Companies have a vested interest to not be regulated. And if their users can support that interest, then that furthers their interests. So that as a premise is already a difficult place to start from. I think politicians have struggled to build trust with people on this issue because of their lack of understanding of how the technology works and how young people develop in online spaces. It's nuanced. We've all experienced things that we would not have wanted to see online, and we've all built incredible relationships probably online as well. And so that tension, I think, is part of highlighting our messaging is leaning into that tension and talking about why we think online safety and privacy is important for young people, but also why we believe in continuing to foster technology in online spaces that does work for your productivity, that does work for your education, that does create the connections that you really want to be creating. I think another part of this is zooming out to the core of what this problem really is about. And that's the business model and the power of these companies and the power that they've accumulated and built, sometimes illegally, to get to the place where they've been able to get to. And I think young people generally like gravitate to that as a means of connection to one another. Like we are generally skeptical of major corporations and their ability to control large parts of our lives. Like young people want autonomy. So I want us as a community to shift more in that direction to talking about the power that these companies have and how they've really restricted our ability to thrive online. And so I think if we can talk about regulation in that way as unlocking untapped potential and experience online and getting people to understand and buy into a vision of what we believe online safety and privacy can look like, we will bring more young people into the conversation.
I think it's a really good point, and I think it kind of relates to something that I heard Pete Buttigieg talking about the other week, where he was saying that a lot of these big companies are making people unfree. There are some of the things that are making people most unfree in our society, and freedom is something that connects, young people to old people to everyone. And I think Zaman, that really you highlighted the fact that we really need to reframe this conversation on the basis of freedom and giving young people the freedom of being able to protect themselves online. And having the conversation be a lot more about, you know, about giving young people that agency, giving young people freedom over their own lives and their own decisions and their own security online, and instead of these the conversation centering around older people telling young people what to do in online spaces. So, Ariel, you had something to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really accurate. One of the things, that we talk about in the space, and I think you just touched on that, is that we're not necessarily anti-tech, we're anti-social media, we're anti-ineffective tech, right? We're anti these companies that have made conscious decisions to make our lives less free. And what you just mentioned, right, giving young people the choice to decide what our digital lives look like is one of the most important things to us, right? And that's going to look different for everybody. We're not here to tell people how to interact with tech. We're here to tell companies that they need to stop making that decision for us. One of the things that we say is like nothing about us without us. When you think about the landscape of technology and social media, the main users of the product are young people, right? It's us who have grown up online, who use it really consistently. And so being able to make those decisions and not only make those decisions, but also have a say in what happens is really important for us. And that's kind of at the core what we're all about.
I wanted to ask either or both of you this question. Something that you've recently worked on is the Declaration of Digital Rights. And so I want to ask you about that and how that ties into your overall goal and messaging.
Yeah, so the declaration came together over the course of our campus tour, which we ran last year. We traveled to 5 college campuses across the US and asked young people questions about their online digital experiences. What was working for them, what's not working for them. And hopefully, what we were hoping to do, and I think we were able to do, was get young people to reimagine what a digital experience or ecosystem could look like that works for them. What we heard time and again is young people talking to us about how they liked the ability to connect with friends and family. They liked the ability to have community online, but that they did not like the predatory and addictive algorithms that were feeding them brain rot or endless streams of content that weren't really making them feel productive or making them feel good about themselves. We talked about targeted ads, advertising beauty products when you're not feeling good about the way that you look. And especially around adolescence, like it's such a pivotal time where you're learning about how you can develop as a person. So to be kind of targeted with an algorithm like that was really like the through line that we heard over and over. So taking all these learnings, we came together with our team and our coalition members to develop this Declaration of Digital Rights. It's 12 inalienable rights that we believe should govern digital spaces and that companies should really adhere to prioritize our agency, our autonomy, and what David said, kind of our freedom in being able to use online spaces and be able to thrive in these online spaces. And I hope that the declaration is a guidepost, not only for companies to say, like, are we designing our products to be most inclusive of these ideals, but it's also a guidepost for policy so that we are prioritizing policies that put young people at the center, our agency at the center, giving us choice about our experience, and putting the onus on the companies to give us that choice, not on educators or parents to have to figure out what these systems look like for us.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on everything. I think that it's really important, right? Like that a document like this exists by and for young people, right? That young people kind of decided to come together to do research and ask qualitative and quantitative questions about things that we know and feel to be true, right? All these things that Simon said are experiences that young people have online and, talking to friends, talking to peers or classmates, we understand that and we have a lot of those shared experiences on social media, but without kind of the backing and the research behind it, it can feel really difficult. So I think having a document that young people created ourselves is really important, saying that these are the things that we hold true. And as the mom said, right, we hope that people use that and really internalize it in their processes, both within technology and also.
That's incredible. And I just want to hear a little bit more about that campus tour that you guys ran last year. What was your main focus of the tour, and how did you incorporate young voices into the conversation about, digital rights and shaping your declaration that you wrote? And also, could we talk about each individual pillar of the Bill of Rights, if possible?
Yeah, for sure. I can start with kind of like the foundations of the campus tour, and then I can pass it off to Zaman to do some of those pillars. So we did 5 different stops at 5 different college campuses around the US. It was American University, NYU, Columbia, Stanford, and UNC. And so we made a conscious decision to go to different college campuses where we felt like young people were having these conversations, it was right under the surface. And we, did a variety of things, right? We had a panel at UNC, for example, with young people who were already talking about technology. And we did exercises like, stand on this side of the room if you feel this, stand on that side of the room if you feel that. And at the end of all of our different stops, we asked the same poll questions, right? So we had this poll that we put on the screen as a QR code. And we had our attendees fill it out and share their perspectives on, how does social media make me feel? Or when I think about social media, I feel X, but I want to feel Y. Asking these questions to just get some of that hard data that we've been looking for young people, right? We talk about our experiences, and I think it has become increasingly easy for folks to invalidate that. And so having, this poll of a, diverse set of young people who really care about this issue, who showed out to these 5 different stops in 5 different college campuses, really means something. And so that was part of our programming. We also brought in experts. We brought in Frances Hogan, who was a whistleblower from Facebook, right? Who worked at Facebook, saw things wrong, and then decided to take action around that. So part of it was education, right? Teaching young people, the way that we feel isn't necessarily our fault, that there are larger factors at play. Showing young people that there are people who are working on this, but also empowering young people themselves and ourselves to really use this space as a platform. So those are just some of the things that we did. It was a really phenomenal experience to go and talk to so many young people about things that we hold true. And what we do is, kind of we do with everything with our organizing work is we bring it back to our coalition, right? And we say, here are the things that we found. Let's talk about this. Let's shape it together. And we came up with these principles. It's called the Declaration of Digital Rights. Right? Things like, the right to privacy, the right to choose, things that we hold really closely when we think about how we want the internet and the digital space to look. Zaman, do you want to share more about those specifics?
Yeah, I'll point out three. So we're not going through all of them, but I think the three that like speak to the work that we did and the essence of why we believe that this kind of declaration is important. The first is the right to not be experimented on. And I think this comes from the idea that social media companies are deploying tests on their users every day. Like sometimes you will see a new design feature in your feed that's different to what I would see in my feed. And it's essentially a psychological experiment on you to figure out whether you're the right person or this is the right feature to be able to deploy more broadly. And none of that happens without users' knowledge or consent. So that is core, I think, to what we believe in is creating a social media ecosystem where you know what's happening, where you understand the levers that are being pulled in your direction that may make you feel a certain way. The next is a right to a seat at the table. We fundamentally believe that young people deserve a right to shaping what online platforms look like for them. And we don't think enough companies invest concretely in speaking to young people about their experiences and then translating what they've learned from those experiences into fundamental changes to their products. That doesn't happen enough. I applaud companies who are putting together youth advisory councils, but it's got to go further than that. It's got to be a meaningful seat at the table that actually is part of the decision making. Because if these products are primarily being deployed or are being accessed by us, then we should be at the center of creating what that experience looks like. And then I think we all deserve a right to transparency. The companies have for years created algorithms, what we call like a black box, where you don't really know what levers are being pulled and why certain pieces of content were fed to you. We know primarily that things are being recommended to you because it's going to keep you longer on the platform. And if you're there longer, then they can make more money off of advertising to you or collecting your information. And so the simple fact of young people understanding and knowing more about the products that they're using, I think would create the friction that we need to be able to take back some control of our lives. And I think the declaration is a first step at being able to empower young people to think about what more of that collective shared vision of what we could buy into for a digital ecosystem that works for us, that is designed for us.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad you guys put that together because that seems, really impactful, especially in this moment. So recently, just to incorporate some current events here, the Senate and the House of Representatives passed the Take It Down Act, which is a law that was passed on a very bipartisan basis, sponsored by Senator Ted Cruz on the Republican side and Senator Amy Klobuchar on the Democratic side. I would just like to ask you both, what do you think is the impact of this act as it relates to the internet safety space? And what do you think it says that so many people from different sides of the aisle came together to support young people and pass this piece of legislation?
Yeah, for sure. So our coalition endorsed the Take It Down Act and did direct advocacy on it. And I'll give a little bit of a primer of what the Take It Down Act is. It is a bipartisan bill that, as you just said, passed both the House and the Senate. Um, that essentially aims to target non-consensual intimate imagery, sometimes known as deepfakes. And this can either be captured or AI generated, right? So, someone can take the face and superimpose that on someone else's likeness and have that digital footprint do or say anything. And whether it's captured image, right, that already exists or something that was AI generated in the way that I just described, it's a fraud. And this bill aims to tackle that. And what it does is it criminalizes the publication of non-consensual intimate imagery under or the threat to do so for interstate commerce, right? Meaning that if someone is threatening to publish this content of you, again, whether captured or AI generated, people have recourse now. It's something that we see as bipartisan. It's something that we see as a really essential step. It does not infringe on anything free speech. That's not the area that it touches. It protects lawful speech. But the other thing it does that we care a lot about is it requires companies to take down these pieces of information, right? These frauds. And that's really essential, right? Because for too long, companies have just gotten away scot-free without any responsibility of what happens on their platforms. And so by saying that, when there's harmful content being posted, companies have a responsibility to take it down, right? That namesake, take it down. That's really meaningful. And so, David, as you just mentioned, that was a bipartisan effort. That I think goes to show the extent of the issue that we're tackling within technology. That people on both sides of the aisle are willing to come together and make concessions, make agreements in order to tackle something, much deeper. This was the first bill that was passed on AI harms, and I'm very hopeful that it won't be the last. So I think for young people to have really worked together in a coalition to make this bill a reality has been really meaningful. But also to see bipartisan support. A lot of what we do is try to impart the fact that regulating big tech and addressing digital harms should not be a partisan issue because it doesn't there's no basis for it. And so noting that people came together is important for us.
Yeah. No, that is the massive coalition that was built around the Take It Down Act is something that I think is quite notable in our really divided political moment in the United States right now. And yes, it was brought together by a lot of young people who stood up and said that our generation does not deserve to be treated in this way online, and we need protections for up and coming AI crimes that are out there. So I think it's really significant that this was passed. On a completely different note, in the tech space, one other piece of legislation that's gotten some sort of support but hasn't been passed yet is a ban on TikTok in the United States. So originally, President Trump was in support of a TikTok ban. Then, as he often does, he changed sides on this issue. It seems like everyone is going back and forth. I just wanted to ask you, where do you and your organization, where does your organization stand on banning TikTok across the United States? And how do we talk to young people about, some of the possible threats that TikTok poses when it is such a critical app for communication between young people and does serve as a real key form of entertainment and also sharing of information for our generation?
Yeah, it's a great question, David. And to the discussion that we had earlier about bringing and injecting nuance back into this conversation, Let's do that because two things can be true at the same time. TikTok can be both a nefarious, manipulative company that prioritizes its algorithm on maximizing its collection of data and targeting an algorithm back at you that is hyper specific. There are national security concerns about the company and its processing of data overseas in China. That can be true. And what can also be true is that it is a great form of entertainment, community building, of organizing. Young people organize on this platform as well. So the two can exist in the same continuum. And I think we have lost a lot of that nuance from the conversation as we've seen the sort of back and forth over will it be banned or will it not be banned. There was that brief uh, day where I think TikTok was unavailable and then it was brought back supposedly by President Trump. And I think it gets at a broader discussion that I think young people can all agree on is that tech companies do have a really powerful influence over our legislature and their ability to stop this from happening or to uh, build a relationship with this current administration to make sure that their app was still available, I think is part of the concerns that we have around the power of tech companies right now. So again, those two things can be true at the same time. And honestly, we've had various discussions about this throughout our coalition. We don't have a hard and fast position on this because we see the value of both sides of this discussion. What can happen, though, is that the discussion around TikTok and banning it be the end all of the debate and conversation around tech policy. The United States does not have a federal data privacy regime. We need privacy in this country for adults and for young people. Right now, there are really no laws that govern data brokers and their ability to gather up massive amounts of data on us and sell it to advertisers. And we should have a right over where our sensitive data is going. So we cannot stop with these kinds of approaches that maybe don't prioritize the longer view of what regulating online spaces looks like. And I think even the Take It Down Act, like it is a first step. We can't stop with just the Take It Down Act. We need to be able to continue pushing at the state and the federal level. And one thing I do want to let your listeners know about is that currently Congress is exploring putting a 10-year moratorium on all states' ability to regulate AI companies, essentially saying that Congress is the best place for the legislature to be able to do this, and that states should not have the right to be able to do this for at least 10 years. So that's extremely concerning to us because states have been a place where we have activated young people to get involved in this conversation around regulating and taking on big tech. If the AI moratorium is included in the reconciliation package that passes before the end of this working session, states will lose the ability to regulate AI companies, and it will be the biggest gift to big tech companies. So we have to prevent that from happening. Even if it dies on a process rule in the Senate, we expect this idea to come back up again from big tech companies. So I think the through line from this conversation is we can't stop with the bare minimum or the early approaches. We have to be able to continue to push the ball forward.
Thank you so much for all that amazing information. So, as we are reaching the end, I want to make a comment and then also get your closing thoughts. And the comment is honestly, as I've been following your work, you have done a great job at bringing people to a consensus on these issues, which are usually very fiery and heated. So, I want to hear how important it is to do that, bring people of all generations to some sort of compromise. How do you do it, and why is it really important? And then what's next that you can share? And finally, any closing thoughts you have.
Yeah, I can speak quickly to the way that we approach this work. And right, we talk a lot about intergenerational organizing. We as young people know that, social media exists within our lives as a staple for many of us, but we also know that social media exists for so many other people. The organizing work that we do is entrenched in community, and we are young people who have a coalition, right? We have young people who work with us and organizations that work with us, but we ourselves are part of a larger ecosystem. We're part of a larger coalition of people working on this. And so when we think about, right, issues that happen online, some of these issues have offline mirrors as well. And so to that, we really look towards intergenerational organizing, right? Working with coalitions, working with other individuals to make something happen, right? Just recently, earlier this month, we were with a larger coalition of parents to protest at Meta's headquarters in New York City, right? And so when we think about working with young people, it's not just about young people, although we feel a lot of the harms. It's about working together as a whole. And that's really always been our ethos across age, across party lines. That really is at the essence. Um, I think for your listeners, the main thing to impart from my perspective, right, is um, this is not a lost cause. I think sometimes it can be really easy to look at social media and see the largeness and the vastness of it and its impact in our lives and feel really daunted by it and feel really nervous and honestly I feel that too sometimes. Like sometimes I have questions of like, how can we be most effective? And the answer, right, is not just saying that we're going to allow these companies to have rule over our lives, but to work together as young people have always done and as young people will continue to do, to start making improvements, right, bit by bit. The other thing that I would also plug is that if you're listeners, right, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, whoa, like I'm really thinking about this too, or like that's been on my mind lately. We have an open coalition so people can join our Slack, you can get our emails. It's at designitforus.org or on social media at designitforus. And we're an open community, right? If you've been thinking about this for a few years now, or you're just listening to this podcast and thinking that you might want to be involved or just talk to more people who are working on this issue, I really encourage you to join our coalition.
This has been a really great conversation because I think it captures where Gen Z is at right now, that we want to be able to impart our opinion and our vision for the future in a way that creates a future that we want to live in. Like we, I think, understand better than a lot of other folks that you have to really harness the vision that you believe in and make it happen if that's what you want to see. So I really believe in the work that we're doing. I think there's a bunch of different ways for folks to get involved. Over the next couple of months, we'll be continuing to advocate for state-based approaches to holding big tech accountable. We'll be continuing to do research about how these companies are impacting our lives. And then we'll also be, working to make sure that we prevent bad policies from happening. And, that moratorium, for example, that ban on states to be able to act, that's a great opportunity for young people to get involved and make their voices heard by calling their members of Congress and letting them know their perspective. And I know it sounds simple. I'm sure in the advocacy space, people hear it all the time. But as somebody who was once on the receiving end of those calls, I know that it has an impact. Like these members of Congress have to do where their constituents are at and reflect that to the broader legislature. So I think there's a myriad ways for young people to get involved right now. I couldn't think of a better time for young people to be thinking and talking about tech policy.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. It was a great conversation, and thank you all for your work in this space. It's really necessary again in this moment. So thank you everyone also for listening to Pod Save the Youth this week. We'll see you next week.